So last we left off, this is where I had the floor plan at this stage. The goal is to put in the 3-foot door by the kitchen and then put in the kitchen fixtures, the kitchen counter. There's a window that needs to go in there as well that I'll place. And that should more or less complete the interior. And then for the exterior, put in the decks, the one that's right off of the living room, the other one that's off of the kitchen, and then the entry, the steps that lead up by the entry. So in this drawing, I'm going to pan over here. I know I need the door at this location, and I know that I'm going to make a copy of the other 3-foot door. So I'll go ahead and just type CO and enter for copy. I'll select the door, and then I'm going to zoom in here. And I know that I need these 2 line segments as well. So I might as well take them with. I've selected the objects that I want. I'll go ahead and enter with my keyboard. I'll pick this point here as my base point, take it over. I'll turn ortho off, and then I'll pan over. And you can see me zooming and panning. Get comfortable doing that. I'll go ahead and click my door right here because I simply just want to make a copy of it in the general vicinity. I don't want to make any more copies, so I'm going to go ahead and tap the escape key, and that will terminate the command. The next thing I want to do is to rotate my door. I will go ahead and type RO and enter to rotate. Selecting my objects, I'll use an implied window. I will enter, and I'll pick a point here. I'll click, and then rotate my door. I'll turn ortho back on. But if you don't want to turn ortho back on, you can actually specify the rotation right now by typing in 90. So I can type 90 and enter, and it will rotate my door 90 degrees. I didn't have to turn ortho on. And then as I look at my example, that door actually needs to be swinging in the other direction. So I'm going to mirror that door. So what I'll type is MI for mirror and enter. Now I could select the door again, but I can also type P for previous. And when I do that, I'll type P and enter. It will take me back to the previously selected items. So it picks the door. That's what I wanted. I enter. And now I'm going to pick a point somewhere here. I'll click one time, and I'll take that line straight out. And this time I do need to turn either ortho or polar on. And I'll turn ortho on. Click out here. And this time, yes, I do want to erase the source object. So I click yes. Next thing to do is move it into position. And if I look at my example, I said to go ahead and make sure that you keep about 3 inches away from the wall. I also see that the wall is going to end here where the door is located. So I'm going to be very mindful of that situation in my drawing. So I'll go back over here, and I'm going to type M for move and enter. To select the objects, I'm going to type P for previous and enter. It has selected those objects. I go ahead and enter. I specify the base point of this endpoint right here. I'll turn ortho off, and I will take the door and place it right here. And now what I'm going to do is double check and make sure that it is in the right location, and it looks like it. I zoom in, I'll zoom out. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off that door layer because I want to start trimming out the opening. I'm going to come up here to my Home tab, Layers panel, click on Off. I'm going to select this object. I'm prompted that this is my current layer. Do I really want to turn it off? And for now, the answer is yes. And now I can go ahead and right click and enter to terminate the command. And now I simply type TR for trim and enter. And I'm going to use a fence. So I'm going to click out here one time. That will automatically give me my first fence point. And then I'm going to click over here. And that will trim the 2 lines. And I will now enter on my keyboard, terminates the command. Now I'm going to zoom down here because I want you to see something. I have two line segments, one here and one here. In AutoCAD, we do not want to have this happening. We always want one single continuous line. To fix this, instead of erasing one line and then taking the other one and stretching it over, I'm going to use the join command. So I'm going to type J and enter. And I'm going to select the two objects, 1, 2, and then I'm going to enter. And the command line shows me two lines joined into one line. And now when I hover and I click, it's one single line segment. And this is what you need to do in order to keep your drawing as clean as possible. So I'm going to tap the escape key now. And I want to turn on that layer that I just turned off. So I can come up here to my layers panel. I can click on the down arrow for the layers and turn it on here. But I'm not going to do that because I want to show you another way of doing this. I'm going to the layers drop down, and then I'm going to click on this icon that will restore the previous layer state or the layer settings. So when I do that and I click on it, it turns that layer back on for me. So I'm going to continue now, and my focus is on the kitchen, and I will need to bring in my kitchen fixtures. I am going to pause with my floor plan and actually go back to my kitchen fixtures and make sure that I have blocks. And if I don't have blocks, then I'll go ahead and make the blocks. Before I leave this drawing temporarily, I am going to zoom extent, and I'll type Z enter, E enter. That way I get to see the extent of my drawing. I will go ahead and save it. And to save it, I can go to the application button over here and click save. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is click on the save icon. I can also type SAVE to save it. But the one I'm going to use is the Control S keyboard shortcut. So Control S will save it. And if you look at the command line, it says Q save. Basically means it's a quick save. 4 different ways to save. Pick the one that you like the most. Now I'll go ahead and open up my kitchen fixtures. So let me do that now. I'll go over here to my application button, click on open, drawing, and I'll look for that drawing. There's my kitchen fixtures. I'll go ahead and click open. And now what I'd like to do is make them into blocks because I'm hovering over them and I see that they are not blocks at this point yet. I'll double check that. I'll go over here to insert, click on the insert drop down, and I don't have any blocks in this drawing file. So I'll proceed to make blocks out of all 3 of my fixtures, beginning with the refrigerator first. So I will type B and enter. That opens up my block definition window. I'll enter the name. Once I enter the name, I'm going to pick the point. But before I click on that, I can tell right away that I do want X and Y equal to 0 because that's where I started this drawing. Just to confirm, right? If I click pick point for that insertion base point, and I click right here, it shows me that X and Y at that point is equal to 0. So I'll leave that alone, come over now to the objects, and I will go ahead and select the objects. And I'm going to window my refrigerator like this. And then I enter. I see the preview. I'm going to move on. The behavior, that looks fine. The settings look fine. And I will not place a description. That's optional. You're more than welcome to. And now I can go ahead and click OK. I know it's a block because when I hover over it and I pause, It lets me know that it is a block reference. And I see that all of the lines are highlighted. So I will now continue to make the next block. I'll type B and enter. I'm going to name this block. I will now pick the base point. And I'm going to select this corner here for now. And it gives me the coordinates for X and Y at that point. I'll select my objects. Right click to enter. And I didn't mention it in the previous block, but I went ahead and just left the option to convert to block in place. So it automatically made a block out of it, and I was able to see it. Behavior is fine. Settings are okay. Description optional. And I will go ahead and click OK. I'll hover over one of the lines or one of the circles, and I see that it is a block. I also know that I have the block because if I come up here to my block panel and I click on the insert dropdown, I see it listed there now too. I'll click off of that. One more block to go. I'll go ahead and type B and enter. Give the block the name. I'll pick the insertion base point. And in this case, I think I want to pick this midpoint here. I will go ahead and select my objects. And I'll select all of these using an implied window. Right click takes me back to my block definition window. Behavior, settings, and description are fine. And by the way, I have not been opening in the block editor. Leave that alone for now. And then I'll go ahead and click OK. So I now have the third block. Hovering over it, I can see that it is a block reference. And then if I pick all three, if I just select them, I can see that they all have one insertion base point, and that's that grip that you see on all of them. I'll tap the escape key, and then I will go ahead and close this drawing file, which now contains 3 blocks. When I go to close it, I'm prompted if I'd like to save changes, and the answer is yes. Now that I've made the blocks, coming back to my floor plan, I will go ahead and bring the blocks in. So to do that, I'll go ahead and type I for insert and enter. It opens up my blocks palette, and I'm going to come up here to the library, click on the icon, and I'd like to open up the drawing that contains my kitchen fixture blocks. So I've selected the drawing file and I will click open. And now it's just a matter of pausing for a moment while it loads the drawing file into my drawing. I now have the blocks in my drawing. I will now select them. I will click on the image and then bring it into my drawing. And I'm simply just going to place it anywhere in the general location. So somewhere here for the refrigerator. I'll go back to my blocks palette. I'll select kitchen sink. Bring it in. I'll go back. Select the electric stove and bring it in. I have the blocks in there now. I'll go ahead and close the blocks palette. And I will zoom into this general area so I can go ahead and draw the countertops in there. Going back to my example, I'm looking at the general dimensions. Just want to point out that with the refrigerator and the stove, I'm leaving an inch away from the wall and from the countertops. I'll start with the refrigerator first. So I know the refrigerator needs to go in this corner. I'll go ahead and select it. I'll pick it from this one grip point, which is the insertion point, and simply move it over here for now. And then I'm going to grip it again, and then right click and rotate. And I'd like to rotate it down in this direction, and it's showing me the angle. And instead of turning ortho on, I'm just going to type in 270 as the angle and enter. And now what I'd like to do is move it into place. And I stated earlier that I'm keeping it 1 inch away from the walls and also the counter. Here's what I prefer to do. Since it's already highlighted, I'm going to type M and enter. So it selects that object to move. I'm going to take it from this endpoint and I'm going to put it right here in this corner. And then I'm going to zoom in there. And now I'm going to type M again to move and enter. Select the object. I'll type P for previous and enter. It selects my refrigerator block. So I enter again. And now for the base point, I'll go ahead and click right here, and I'd like to move it straight down. And this time I will turn ortho on. Toggle it on, bring it down. I'll type in 1 and enter. And then to repeat that move command, I simply enter again. To select the object, I will type P for previous and enter. It selects the refrigerator. I go ahead and enter again. I'll pick my base point right here. I'll give it 1 click. I'll move it away from the wall. And notice how I'm exaggerating that movement. And I'm going to type in the value of 1 and enter. I have moved it away 1 inch from the wall along the top and along the right. Now what I'd like to do is go ahead and put in the countertops. What we do is we draw them at a default depth of 2 feet. We know that they're slightly wider than that or deeper than that, but that's just what we typically use in these architectural drawings. Drawing it at 2 foot depth is going to be fine. So I'll go back to my drawing. I'm going to zoom out like this. And I'm going to type O for offset and enter. The offset distance is going to be 2 feet and enter. And I select this line, offset it to the left. And then I select this line and offset it up. And then right click, enter to terminate. And now I need to change the layer. So I'm going to use an implied crossing window, which goes from right to left so that it crosses through the lines here. I select them. And then I go back to my Home tab, Layers panel, Layer drop down, and I place it on the appropriate layer. So just by clicking on that layer name. And now I'll tap the Escape key. And then the next thing I want to do is clean up this corner. So I can use either trim or fillet. Let me show you both examples. So if I type TR and enter, I can use a fence line from here to there. And then right click and enter. Or if I undo that, I can type F and enter. My default radius is 0. So then it's just a matter of selecting the objects. I select the first and then the second. I'm going to continue, and I know that the bottom line is longer than it should be, but I'm going to hold off on that. You'll see how this works out. So if I go back to the drawing, I now need to offset 10 feet and then 3 feet. So from here, I'm going to type O and enter, a distance of 10 feet and enter. I select this object, offset it 10 feet to the left. And then while I'm still in the offset command, I pick this line. And instead of offsetting it over 10 feet in that direction, continuing to the left, I'm just going to type in 3 feet and enter. And now I'm going to pan and zoom and continue. So let me right click and enter. The sink and stove are not where they should be. That's all right. You don't need to do anything yet, but if they are in the way for you, simply grip them and move them out of the way. Tap the escape key to remove the grips and continue. So what I'd like to do right now is extend this line down. So I'm going to type EX and enter. Extend it down like that. Right click and enter to terminate that command. And then I'm going to use the fillet command. Something I haven't done yet in this drawing session. Let me right click, go to my recent input, and I can see the list of commands that I've used. And from here, I'll select fillet. And I select the 2 lines. And then it takes me out of the fillet command and I can continue. I'm getting there slowly, doing this one step at a time. The next thing for me to do is to take this stove and actually place it where it needs to go, which is more or less in the middle of that counter. I'm going to rotate it. So I'm going to type RO, enter, select my object, enter, picking a base point, perhaps right here in the middle somewhere, and then rotating that 180 degrees. So I click over here. And then I want to place it in the proper location. So I'm going to take this step by step, and I'm going to show you a couple of ways that I would do this. So one way would be to type M and enter, select my object, enter, pick it from this midpoint, and then place it at this midpoint. And then I would type M again and enter, select the objects. I would type P and enter, enter again. And I would move it from here straight down and perhaps turn on perpendicular. And that was a shift right click for me, and place it here. And then one more move, and that would be M, enter, select my object, enter, and then pick from here and take it up 1 inch. So I type 1 and enter. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it, let me undo all of this. So I know that I'd like for it to be in the middle. So I'm going to do this. I'll draw myself a line. So L, enter from this midpoint straight down, and I'll use my shift right click to force the perpendicular object snap right here. And then I'll enter to terminate the command. And then I'll zoom in, select that line, and from this point, click on it and take it up 1 inch. So I type 1 and enter, and then tap the escape key. So that's the point I'd like to use. And then I zoom out, and then I type M again and enter, select my object, enter, pick this midpoint, perhaps turn ortho off, and then place it right here. And then take that line, select it, and delete. A couple of different ways of doing that. To continue, I need to leave a gap on either side as well. Back to the drawing, I'll zoom in. I'm double checking to make sure that I do have O track turned on. And it is. What I'll do is this, type L and enter, zoom in right here, hover over this intersection, let it find the intersection, and then track that intersection to my right. I haven't clicked. I just paused here, and now I'm moving it over. I type in 1 and enter, and then I can start drawing that line coming straight down. Maybe I should have had perpendicular as a running object snap because I seem to be using it quite a bit, but that's all right. I'm used to doing my shift right click, and then I pick perpendicular and I click here and then enter. And now I can do the same thing on the opposite side by drawing the line and tracking it. But I can also mirror this line. So I type MI, enter. I take the line, click on it, enter. The midpoint is right here. So I pick that point and I'm going to take it straight up. I don't have ortho on, but I know that if I click on this midpoint, I am going to get that straight line. So I click. And no, I do not want to erase the source object. So I click no. And then from here, it's just a matter of trimming. To trim, I'll type TR and enter, and then I can go ahead and start trimming. I can click here, but then it doesn't trim it all the way to where I want. So now I have to come in here and pick this segment and that segment. That's one way of doing it. So let me enter and then undo. And then I want to show you something here for trimming, an option. So if I type TR and enter, before I select my objects, I look down at the command line and an option down there says cutting edges. And I see that one of the T's in cutting is capitalized. So I know that I can type T and it will give me that option. Typing T and enter, I'm now prompted to select cutting edges. And I only want to use this edge and this edge, those two lines, as cutting edges. Once I do that, I can enter. And now to select the object to trim, it's just this one right here. And notice it's trimming it back to those two lines that I selected as cutting edges. So I'll go ahead and click and I'm all set. And then right click, enter to terminate the command. Now I need to place the sink in here. I also want to go back to the drawing and show you that there's no dimension given for how far this counter needs to extend towards the hallway. But if you look at this carefully, you'll see that it's more or less in line with the wall. When I drew the line or when I was offsetting, I was basically offsetting from that line location. So the distance where I have it right now is going to be just fine. So let me go ahead back to the drawing and you'll see that there's the endpoint. And if I were to draw a line, so I'll simply type L, enter, and I pick from this endpoint right here and I take it over. See how that lines up? It's right where I want it to be. So let me go ahead and tap the escape key. That was just me confirming that distance. And I'll go ahead now and right click and repeat the line. I'll put a line from here to there, enter. And I'm realizing that I have not offset or I have not given myself the 1-inch distance here on the refrigerator. So let me zoom in there and take care of this real quick. I'll type L, enter, using my object tracking, hover at this intersection. It finds the intersection, bring my cursor down, type 1 and enter. And then take my line straight across. Easier for me right now just to do a shift right click and go perpendicular. I'll tap the escape key. And now at this point, I'll use my fillet command because if I use trim, everything is a cutting edge. So I'm going to have to do multiple trims. So I'll type F, enter. And I know that it's at 0 for the radius. So it's going to give me this nice corner there. And now finally get that sink in place. And it will be placed at the midpoint here. It's safe to assume that. So go ahead and simply type M, enter, select the object, enter, and I'll move it from this midpoint to this midpoint for now. And then I'll zoom in, type RO, enter, and then to select the objects, because it is the previous object, I'll go ahead and type P and enter. It selects my sink. I'll enter. The base point is the midpoint again. And then I'll simply rotate it like that. And then one more move. I'll type M, enter, P, enter, because it's the previous object. Enter again. And I'll pick a point out here as my base point. and I'll take it in and I'll turn ortho on and I'll go 1 inch. And that's far enough. Almost done with the kitchen. It's just a matter of dropping in the dashed lines that represent the cabinets. We cannot see the cabinets because they're above our head based on where we're cutting through this floor plan. So we show them in as dashed or hidden lines, similar to the way we have shown the closet lines that represent the rod. I'll go back to the drawing now. And that distance is going to be 1 foot. So I'll type O to offset and enter. The distance is 1 foot. So you can either type this in, 1 foot, or you can type this in, 12 inches. Your choice. And then enter. If I offset this line over to my left, it's too long and I would still have to modify the layer. So I'll actually take this line and offset it over to my right and click. And then I'll do the same thing with this line, bring it down, and then this line, bring it down. And then right click, enter. I'd like to use the fillet command. So let me right click, go to my recent input. There's fillet. I pick it, select the line, and then this one, and then one more line. So I'll type L, enter from this point straight down. And let's see if I can use tracking now. So I'll pan over here. I'll try to track this endpoint over, down, and it looks like that will work because I have ortho on. I'll click and then right click, enter to terminate the command. I zoom out. And what I'd like to do is have the lines here look just like the lines in my closet. From the Home tab, Properties panel, Match Properties. So I click on Match Properties. I'm prompted to select the source object. The source object, if I zoom in, is this one right here. So I pick it. And as soon as I click on it, I'm prompted to select destination object or objects. And notice how it has that paintbrush, which basically means that it's going to paint these properties and apply them to the objects that I now select. So I'll come over here and I'll simply pick this one and this one. And then I'll use an implied crossing window like this to pick those two lines. And then right click, enter terminates the command. And that's my kitchen. And now what I'm going to do is back to my preview. I'll put in my steps that lead up to the door, the deck in the top left corner, and then I have a deck over here on the right-hand side. I will let you decide how deep you want this distance to be. Here, if I draw a line and I start at this point and I'd like to take that line down, I can start to approximate how deep that is. And it looks like 5 feet might do the trick. So I'm going to type in 5 feet and enter. And then I'm going to take my line straight across. And let's see, ortho's on, so tracking should work. I'll track the midpoint here and I'll draw the line right there. And then right click, enter. That's the landing outside of my building, but I have steps leading up to it. And I have, if I look at my drawing, a total of 2 steps and then 3 lines. Each one of the lines represents what we call a riser, and that's the vertical step up. What I see in between those 3 lines, those are the treads. So let me go ahead and draw those in, and they're typically anywhere from 11 to 12 inches, and we'll make ours 12 inches. 2 steps at 12 inches. Come in over here. I'll type O for offset and enter. I already have the distance of 1 foot since I was using it last, so I'll enter. I select this object, click down, and then select this object, click down, enter to terminate the command. I will go ahead and instead of using the fillet command, I'll just pick this line and grip it from this endpoint and just take it down to that endpoint there. Tap the escape key. 1, 2, 3 risers. And we're going up a total of 6 inches. So we go from 0 when I'm standing at this ground level. I come up 6 inches, and then I come up another 6, that's 12. And then I come up another 6, and that's 18 total inches. That's all set. Now I'll go over here to this area by the sliding door. I'll draw a line. So I'll type I'll enter. From this endpoint straight up, ortho's on. I'll go ahead and track this endpoint here. Click, and then click. Right click and enter. It's up 18 inches. It is up to you to place the steps. Make them as wide as you want, but make sure that they remain 12 inches. The steps where people are going to step on. But the width of them, that's entirely up to you. So decide where you'd like to place them. That's your choice to make. And then I'm going to come over here and I'll say the same thing about the steps over here. Just imagine this is a deck out here where perhaps you can go out. This is your kitchen. Maybe you have a table out there. Start thinking about using that space perhaps as a place to eat a meal when you have nice weather. You decide how big you'd like to make this outdoor deck. I'll start by drawing a line. I'll type L, enter. And I'm deciding to start here. It doesn't mean you have to do that. I'll click. I'll take it out. Perhaps a distance of 10 feet for me. So I'll type 10 feet and enter. I'll come straight up. Where do I want to stop? This is entirely a choice that I want you to make. For me right now, let's say I decide to make it 15 feet. So I type 15 and enter, and then I'll bring it straight back. And then I'll use my shift right click to make sure it's perpendicular right there. And then right click enter to terminate. That's my deck. But go ahead, make yours whatever size you'd like to make it, and make sure you include the steps so that you can go from this deck down to the ground level. So that's entirely up to you. The other thing that's up to you also, don't forget, is to put in the window openings. Right now, there are no window openings in the living dining area, so that's in your hands. And speaking of window openings, I forgot to place my one window right here. So let me do that, and then I think I'm going to be all set. I'm going to copy this window from my bathroom. I'm going to zoom in there, type CO, enter, window all of this, enter. I'll pick this base point here, this midpoint, zoom out. Let me turn ortho off, bring it down here. And you notice how I'm not in a rush to place it exactly where it needs to go. I just want to bring it into the general vicinity first. So I'll click, and then I'll tap my escape key to terminate the command, zoom in, and then type RO to rotate and enter. To select the objects, I will go ahead and window them like this and enter. I'll pick this midpoint here, rotate straight down, and looks like it's tracking that midpoint, so I'll take it and click. And now to place the window, what I'd like to do is place it. Oh, I didn't finish the overhead cabinets. They're running all the way through, and it shouldn't based on the example that I provided. I'll fix that in just a moment. What I'd like to do is place this window somewhere in the middle of the cabinet, or rather the counter here. I'm going to draw a line. So I'll type L, enter. And I'll draw a line from the midpoint here. And I will use shift right click to pick perpendicular right there. And then right click enter to terminate. And now I'll type M, enter. And I will move this window, enter, from this midpoint to that midpoint. And I'll go ahead and take this line. I was going to erase it, but I'm realizing that I actually need to stop my cabinets. So watch what I'll do. I have it selected. I'll go ahead and type M, enter, and I'll move it from this endpoint right here. But the cabinets can't stop exactly at that intersection. Here's what I'll do. I want to bring the cabinet down a couple of inches, and I know that this distance here is 2 inches. So I'll take advantage of objects that I've already drawn and use those object snaps. So I'm going to type M, enter. I'll take the line, enter, and I'll simply move it from this endpoint to that endpoint. And it's showing me that that's 2 inches. I'll click and I'm all set. And then finally do a fillet, F, enter between these 2 lines. And then I want to match the properties. Keyboard shortcut for match properties is MA. So I type MA, enter, and I would like to select this as the source and this as the destination, and enter. And now I have completed the drawing as shown in the example. Do not forget, you need to put windows in, and you can decide what type of windows. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Bedrooms need windows, and the living dining area are in need of windows. And then you need to provide steps to go down from those decks to the ground level. And that is the floor plan.